I am 52 years old, and the morning a woman, husband's funeral with a child on her hand, and that same evening, sat down at the kitchen table and called my attorney. I saved it for later. What I want to tell you now is everything that came before that conference room. Paperwork the way other men understood sports or weather, instinctively, completely. Christine, a verbal agreement is just a conversation. I had read thousands of contracts, wills, trust documents, and asset filings. 34. He was a regional dependable, the kind of man who made reservations, forgot an anniversary. We had 23 years together. Or at least I thought we did. Thomas died on a Tuesday in March. Heart attack. He was 57 years old. He was at his desk at work when it happened, and then, at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon, dark hair, composed, dressed appropriately, which somehow made it worse. My name is Christine Wallace. I shook every hand in that room. I poured myself a glass of water. I was 12 years old and say things like, I worked for a civil litigation firm in Cincinnati for 19 years. I held his hand. A Thursday afternoon at the church we had attended together for 16 years. Thomas's colleagues came. His brother David flew in from Portland. A woman I had never seen before walked through those doors. I straightened my back. I accepted every condolence with a steady voice and a dry face. After the last guest had gone and the house was finally quiet, because something my father had told me. Christine, the woman who cries in the meeting, loses the meeting. I walked in with my folder and watched the other attorney's face go completely pale. So let me start from the beginning. Ohio for 38 years. He wore the same gray suit 3 days a week and drove but he understood. He used to sit across from me at the breakfast table when a signed document is a fact, so I knew what a clean document looked like. I married Thomas Wallace when I was 29. He was director for a logistics company, organized 2 weeks in advance and never. His assistant called me at 11:14 in the morning and he did not speak. The funeral was 4 days later. I wore the black dress I had bought for my mother's funeral 8 years before. His golf friends came. She was somewhere in her early 40s. I had never seen before walked into and a lawyer by her side. I did not fall apart. 30 years ago was playing on repeat in my head. Save the crying for the car, because that moment only makes sense when you know the full weight of what was inside it. My father, George Harmon, was a tax attorney in Columbus. He was not a wealthy man in the flashy sense. Ford that was 4 years older than it needed to be. I became a paralegal because of him. And I knew what a tampered one looked like, too. I drove to the hospital and sat with him for the last 40 minutes of his life. Beside her was a boy, maybe 10 years old, with Thomas's jaw and Thomas's eyes and Thomas's way of standing very still, in a room full of noise. Behind them both was a man in a suit carrying a leather briefcase. An attorney. I watched them walk in from the front row. I watched David see them and look immediately at the floor. I watched Thomas's assistant recognize the woman and look immediately at me. I sat very still. After the service, the woman approached me. Her name, she said, was Laura Simmons. She said she was sorry for my loss. She said Thomas had spoken of me often. I shook her hand. I said, "Thank you for coming." Then I turned back to the receiving line. That evening, alone in my kitchen, I called my attorney. Her name was Patricia Cole. She had handled the closing on our house 12 years ago, and I had kept her number ever since, the way my father had taught me to keep every number that mattered. "Patricia," I said, "I need to see you tomorrow morning. I need you to pull Thomas's will." Here is what Patricia found. Thomas had a will. We had drafted it together 11 years ago. It left everything to me, the house, the joint accounts, the retirement portfolio, his life insurance policy. Standard, clean, notarized. But there was a second document, filed 8 months ago with a different attorney, a firm in a suburb 20 minutes from our house that neither of us had ever used together, a codicil, an amendment to the original will. It redirected 30% of the retirement portfolio and the full value of a savings account I had not known existed, $340. $1,000 into a trust, established in the name of Marcus Simmons, the 10-year-old boy with Thomas's jaw. The codicil was signed. It was notarized. It had Thomas's signature on every page. Patricia looked at the document for a long time. Then she looked at me over her glasses. "Christine, I want to send this to a forensic document examiner before we do anything else." I said, "How soon?" "1 week." I said, "Do it." I went home that evening and did what my father would have done. I sat at the kitchen table with every financial document in our house, tax returns, bank statements, account records, insurance policies, and I read every page. It took me 4 evenings. What I found after those 4 evenings was this. 11 years ago, Thomas had opened a savings account at a credit union we had never banked with together. He had been depositing between $1,000 and $3,000 per month into that account for 11 consecutive years. Total deposits over 11 years, approximately $280,000. The account had grown to $340,000 with interest. Every deposit had been made on the 15th of the month, 3 days after his paycheck cleared our joint account. The amount was small, enough that our joint balance never dropped in a way that alarmed me. The amounts were consistent, enough that they never appeared unusual in any individual month. I understood sitting there at that kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, a very carefully planned and very patiently executed financial deception that had been running for longer than some marriages last. I photographed every page of every statement. I sent them to Patricia. Then I went to bed. I did not sleep well, but I went to bed. The forensic document examiner's report came back in 6 days. Patricia called me on a Friday morning. "Christine," she said, "the signature on the codicil is consistent with Thomas's signature. But the notarization has irregularities. The notary stamp does not match any registered notary in the county for the date listed. It is possible this document was prepared with a fraudulent notarization." I sat down. "What does that mean legally?" "It means the codicil may be invalid. It means we have grounds to contest it in probate court. And it means that whoever prepared this document either made a significant error or believed no one would look closely enough to catch it." I thought about Laura Simmons walking through those church doors with an attorney already on retainer. She had been planning this before Thomas died. "Patricia," I said, "schedule the conference." The conference was held 3 weeks later in Patricia's office. A round table, 4 chairs, Patricia and I on one side, Laura Simmons and her attorney, a man named Greg Fowler, on the other. Laura arrived composed, professional, had brought a copy of the codicil in a neat folder. Fowler had a legal pad and a confident posture. I arrived with a folder of my own. Mine was thicker. Patricia opened the meeting calmly. She outlined the original will. She outlined the timeline. She outlined our position. Then she nodded at me. I opened my folder. I placed the forensic examiner's report on the table first. "This is the forensic document analysis of the codicil filed 8 months ago," I said. My voice was even. The same voice I used for 19 years presenting evidence in litigation meetings. "The notarization stamp does not correspond to any registered notary in this county on the date listed. The document appears to have been prepared with a fraudulent notarization, which under Ohio law renders it legally void." Fowler leaned forward. He picked up the report. He read the first page, then the second. Something changed in his posture. I placed the second document on the table. "This is 11 years of monthly deposit records from an account Thomas opened without my knowledge, 9 months into our marriage. $280,000 moved from our household income into a separate account over 11 years. Our state recognizes dissipation of marital assets. Every dollar in that account is subject to estate recovery." Laura's hands, which had been folded neatly on the table, went very still. I placed the third document on the table. "And this is the original will, notarized, witnessed, and filed 11 years before the codicil. It names me as the sole beneficiary of all marital assets. The house, the joint accounts, the retirement portfolio, and the life insurance policy. I closed my folder. I placed both hands flat on the table. I understand, I said, looking at Laura directly, that you are in a painful situation. I understand that Marcus is a child who did not choose any of this. I have no desire to punish a 10-year-old boy for decisions his father made, but I will not allow a fraudulent document to override 23 years of marriage, and I will not allow marital assets to be redirected through a trust that should not legally exist. The room was very quiet. Fowler put down the forensic report. He looked at Laura. He looked at his legal pad. Then he looked at Patricia. "We may need a moment," he said. Patricia said, "Of course." They stepped into the hallway. I sat at the table. I did not look at the door. I looked at my folder. My father's voice, quiet and steady in my head. The woman who cries in the meeting loses the meeting. I had saved it for the car. They were in the hallway for 11 minutes. When they came back, Fowler sat down. Laura did not look at me. "We will not be contesting the original will," Fowler said. The probate process took 4 months. The codicil was ruled invalid by the court. The fraudulent notarization was referred to the county prosecutor's office for investigation. The $340,000 savings account was returned to the estate in full. The house remained mine. The retirement portfolio remained mine. The life insurance policy paid out in full to the named beneficiary, me. I established a small separate educational trust for Marcus, funded from my own personal savings. Not from the estate, not from anything Thomas had hidden, from my own account. Because he was 10 years old and had done nothing wrong and would need something someday that had nothing to do with the choices his father made. Patricia told me I didn't have to do that. I told her I knew. David called me 3 weeks after the conference. He had known about Laura for 6 years. He had never said anything because Thomas had asked him not to. I listened to everything he said. Then I told him I needed some time before I was ready to talk to him again. He said he understood. The first Saturday in the house alone, really alone, all of it settled. All of it done. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table where I had sat the night of the funeral. The same chair, the same window. I called my father. "Dad," I said. "Paperwork 1. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It always does, sweetheart. It always does. Here is what I know now. 23 years is a long time to share a life with someone. Long enough to believe you know everything. Long enough to stop checking." I stopped checking. I will never stop again. Know every account. Know every document. Know every signature on every page of everything that has your name attached to it. Not because you expect betrayal, but because the people who love you most will tell you to protect yourself. And they are right. My father spent 38 years telling me that a signed document is a fact. He was right every single time. If this story reminded you to review your own documents, your will, your accounts, your name on what is yours, take that as your sign. Do it this week, not later, this week. And if you know someone who needed to hear this today, share this video with them. Subscribe, drop a comment below, and I will see you in the next one.